All right. Good evening. Welcome to the Lake Mills City Council meeting, December 21st, 2021. I call this meeting to order. We're a little late tonight because we have some new technology in the chamber, but it's all seeming to work well, and it's a lot better than what we had in the past. So all good. So can we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Curler?
Here.
Mr. Waters?
Here.
Mrs. Bishop?
Here.
Ms. Quidnow?
Here.
Mr. Fields?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we can all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, correction and or approval of city council minutes of December 7th, 2021.
I'll make a motion to approve the city council minutes from December 7th, 2021. I'll second.
All right, motion by Ms. Curler, second by Ms. Quidnow. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, that's 5-0. Passes. Correspondence. Ms. Curler, any correspondence from the past 2 weeks?
Yes, I had an email regarding the Rock Lake Activity Center from Carol Burrows, which I think all of us received. And I also received just today an email from Susan Trier representing the Joint Rock Lake Committee. And she's submitting a draft protocol to myself and Steve Wilkie for the beach testing that she spoke to us about a couple of months ago. You might recall she sent a prior email asking if a city council member would sponsor moving that forward, and I volunteered to do that. So I think staff will be initially reviewing the draft, and then I'll follow up with Steve to see how we want to move it forward. And those are my 2 items.
All right, Mr. Fields?
I just had the one email on the Rock Lake Activity Center also.
Okay. I'm also the Rock Lake Activity Center. Anything for you?
I as well, but I also received an email regarding the wastewater treatment plant and some questions surrounding what happened in our meeting last time, so I'm going to be following up with that.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes, I also had an email about the Rock Lake Activity Center and a communication about the street lighting on South Main between the Grist and the corner Mercantile. It's pretty dark there at night, especially as it gets dark so early now.
Anything else there?
No.
I did see something else I wanted to mention on Facebook, actually. It was a posting that was done by the fire department, and they were, at the end of the post, it was requesting for people that might be interested in being a firefighter. So if you or someone you know is interested in becoming a paid on-call firefighter and looking to give back to the community, please stop down at the Lake Mills Fire Department or give us a call at 920-648-5117 for more information. Regular business hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So I did want to mention that. All right. This moves us to item 6, which is questions and public comment. There is no public hearing today, so the public is encouraged to address the council at this time regarding items on the agenda. Public comment may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda if you've registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order. The state's open meeting law discourages action by the council on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes and state your name and address when starting your comments and fill out the sign-in sheet provided. So is there anyone in the gallery that would like to talk tonight, speak tonight? Yep, go ahead. If you can just sign your name and your address there.
Sure. Andy Palmer, 326 West Lake Street. Just like to take a moment and, first of all, thank you for consideration. I see that the Mill Pond is on the agenda. For those of you who are familiar with Lake Mills, I am a Mill Pond resident, have been since 1997. I would just like to call out what I have observed to be significant changes in the Mill Pond and stress that we need a long-term and a short-term strategy, or I think we'll lose a gem of the city. Lake Mills historically has been accessed by many. If you're familiar, there used to be boathouses, used to be a lot of recreational activities, ice skating rink. They used to put a light up in the Mill Pond. Brought the community together. I know we do a lot of that downtown now, but I do think there's some opportunities to revisit activities in the Mill Pond. Because I live there, I'm a heavy user, both from a recreational perspective. We do have a ski boat and a fishing boat, and have had the luxury of having lake access, with the exception of very few times. High water in the past, where we've had restricted no wake zones on the lake, has limited that access. But most recently, it's low water. Not only low water, but sediment changes in the Mill Pond and sediment in the channel proper between the bridges and the lake. I believe it was 1992, the DNR did some dredging. That riprap, while approved by the DNR, has sunken into the channel, has created a narrowness of the channel. And if you go by recently, I think you'll notice, even if we do get sustained rainfall and water levels that normally recover in the spring, there is sediment there that will cause navigational issues. So additional observations in the summertime, we get a fair amount of traffic to the boat ramp. I don't mind that. I like that. I like watching fishermen come and go. Gives me an opportunity sometimes to communicate with folks, see if they're catching anything or not. But the kayaks and the paddleboards really have limited access to the pond. They can come in and they can go out. The weeds and the shallow depths in the surrounding areas near shore are prohibiting any movement, any real access to the fish that may or may not be underneath there. So I would just ask that when the board is considering the plan for the Mill Pond, for the channel, we think long-term. We think about the benefit to downtown, the benefit to the community, perhaps revisiting some of the historical things that we've done on the Mill Pond, and then think about it, the short term, the users that come and go through the pond, whether that be boat owners like myself or users of the boat landing who have restricted access. If we don't make some changes, both short term and long term, I think we'll lose the functionality that I look forward to, and certainly one of the reasons why I've lived on the Mill Pond for the last 20-some years. So again, please look strategically, short-term and long-term. Think of the benefit to the community, and hopefully there'll be some benefit to the homeowners as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Is there any questions for Mr. Palmer? All right. You're welcome to stay for our discussion later on, of course. Thank you. Any other correspondence from the community? Or questions and public comment, I guess. All right. Let's move to the city manager's report. Mr. Wilkie?
Well, I provided the treasurer's cash reports for the utility in the city. I provided some information on goal setting and workshops, visioning. And so unless there are any questions, I know that we'll probably discuss at the end of the meeting times to start strategic planning.
Yeah, I'd like to get some goal-setting meetings going towards the end of January time period, so we'll see if we can set some times. Any questions? Yep.
Yeah, Steve, I just was wondering if you could clarify, in your memo from a few years ago, there was a number of alternatives suggested, in goal-setting and comprehensive plan were two separate things, but, working together. And we've talked already, this council about, we've put money in the budget to do comprehensive planning next year. Do you see that, or would you recommend, could we do those one and then the other, so working on some goals for 2022 to carry us through until we do comprehensive planning with a new manager?
Comprehensive planning is part of it, the visioning. I don't know how you separate the two. We will start in January with the Plan Commission on the comprehensive plan. But it's good for the council to have some conversations about it before you actually start pushing through what's going to be coming through as the data and all the information that's there. Particularly, looking at what the departments are doing and how it impacts the overall budget and operations of the city. So it gets you started on a certain level of conversation and then some objectives that really start focusing the comprehensive plan. So I would definitely say that starting in January is not a bad idea.
Any other questions? All right. Moving to item number 8, Councilmember Board Report and acceptance of minutes from Parks Board of April 21st, 2021, June 16th, July 21st, and November 17th, and Joint Rock Lake Committee of June 22nd, 2021, July 27th, and August 12th. Is there any questions or additional reporting or comments from any council members? Did you have one?
I have one comment, and it's purely administrative. For the July 21st Parks Board minutes, I was marked on the minutes as a presenter. Rather, I was merely there in attendance, so I just want to make that clear.
That would be my fault. The reason why many of these minutes are behind is because I would misspell people's names. So I apologize for that, and I want to make it clear that I will fix that in the future. We did, as a board, decide, because originally I had put all of the people in attendance on one line, but then in our last board meeting, we decided to create a new line for people who are not on the board. So it was attendees or presenters, and I must have just missed the attendee part.
It's okay, I just had nothing to present there, so I didn't want to be held accountable. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
All right, anything else to present or any other questions? Ms. Quiller?
I have one comment and one question. My comment is, I noticed, and I think it was something in the Joint Rock Lake Committee minutes that got me looking on the internet, but the town of Lake Mills now has a Parks Commission. This just was established a few months ago from what I could tell looking online. And I noticed that one of the things they're looking at is recruiting volunteers for doing spring parks cleanup. So I don't know if that's something that our Parks Board has ever thought about doing, like, getting the community together for one-day cleanup or whatever, but I just thought I would mention that since I saw that the town is apparently looking at doing that.
That will definitely come up in conversation now that you've mentioned it. I know that majority of our Parks Board watch these meetings, and so we'll definitely put that on the roster of things to talk about.
Yeah, and there's a county park also, when you think about Rock Lake in our community, in that perspective, there's, city parks, town parks, county park as well. My question kind of tied to Catherine's comment a little bit, but I guess I just wonder if it's feasible to have an administrative staff person assigned to be the secretary for the Parks Board and the Library Board, because I think it would give more consistency in the minutes, get them moving through the process more quickly. And, so in the Parks Board, we have a council member taking minutes. In the Library Board, we have the department head taking minutes. And I just think those boards are pretty active and they're responsible for some, pretty sizable budgets. I just wonder if that's something that we can look at, or if that's a staffing plan. Steve, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I can speak for the Park Board because we just held elections and I was unanimously nominated and elected as as the secretary.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, but what happened with these particular notes, and that's why there's such a delay, is because I kept spelling people's names wrong. There are some different spellings, and I will admit that I guess I just kept making those mistakes. Those have been rectified, and I've figured out a system to get the minutes much more quickly, so you'll see them in a much more timely manner.
And let me just clarify, no criticism
None,
on
no,
your
no, no.
skills at taking minutes, but more just the, is that the role of a council member serving on a board to be the minute taker? That's just a question that I have in my head, because I don't think other council members are responsible for the minutes for their respective boards.
I don't think that the boards and the other council members' responsibilities are as small as the Parks Board. So there is that to think about. The other thing I thought about was that it is nice for me to be able to knowingly report the information to you in a way that is, I tend to be verbose, so when I make notes, I have to be concise, and it's nice for me to be able to spread that knowledge to you in a concise way.
And part of the risk of a council member playing that type of role on a board is they may get reassigned in the following year, because each year we do reassignments. So that's
Well, I think that the Parks Board
kind of
can
a start
figure
over
it out.
thing. Okay.
Yeah, if you want to reassign me, I'm fine with that. I mean, I like my Parks Board, but if you want to put me somewhere else, I will respect your decision.
All right. Anything else on that front? All right. Seeing none, I'll accept these board reports into the city council minutes. Moving forward to item 9, council business. Item A, confirmation of city manager's appointment to treasurer/finance director, Sandra Bell. It's motion 21-12-2-1. Misty, can you read that motion?
City Council Motion 21-12-2-1, confirmation of city manager appointment of city treasurer, finance director.
All right, Mr. Wilkie, comment?
I think we have to have
We
a
do
motion.
have to have a motion, thank you.
You're welcome. I move to adopt motion 21-12-2-1 for the confirmation of the appointment of city treasurer and finance director.
Second.
All right, a motion by Ms. Quidnow, second by Mrs. Bishop. Now, Mr. Wilkie, do you have some comment on this?
Well, as you know, we have a retirement in our administrative staff by Betsy. And so we went out and did some interviews. And we have selected Sandra Sam Bell, who previously worked in Johnson Creek and Fort Atkinson. She is here tonight. And I ask that you confirm my appointment.
All right, is there any questions or comments on this motion? All right, seeing none, let's move forward to a roll call for motion 12-12-2-1.
It's 21-12-2-1. It's okay.
It's 12.
It's 21-12-2-1.
It says 12, but it is 21.
It says 12 on my stuff, okay.
Yeah,
So
mine
we're
too.
talking motion 21-12-2-1?
Yes.
Yes.
The actual motion says 21, but the agenda says 12.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so once again, motion 21-12-2-1, we'll have a roll call. Misty?
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Hi.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
All right, congratulations,
Congratulations.
Sandra. Welcome aboard. When do you start? Is there a date yet? January 24th?
Holding her to that.
All right. All right, looking forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you, and thank you again.
All right, moving forward, item B, discussion on EMS contract. So discussion, Mr. Wilkie.
We've been meeting with representatives of the EMS to talk about contract and other issues. We did run past them a proposed contract. They have it. We sat and met. They're reviewing it. We'll probably go back over it again in January. We wanted them to get an operations plan to us. They discussed that they needed some information from us, so the fire and EMS joint response was the document they were looking for that was included in your agenda. So we've provided that. So we've looked at contract changes. Most of them are timelines, language changes, and response times. Some of it relates to how the financial reporting is done. They're supposed to give us certain financial reporting. One is an audit at the beginning in August, and then the rest is information on how they come up with the per capita. And after reviewing all their financial documents, we would like to have audits done. We've talked with them. We actually have contacted our auditor and asked them to do it. I think they've agreed. I'm pretty sure they've contacted Lake Mills EMS. What's his name?
Chuck Krieger?
No, the guy from EMS.
Is it Jim Cole?
Jim Colgrove.
Okay.
Jim Colgrove had left an email message there for them, and they were getting back to him. And then they're going to provide us a proposal for doing the audits. So we'll probably have to pay for it, but we'll get the information organized in a way that we'd like to see it come out in the future so that we can make a reasonable assessment on what's going on. There's a certain amount of activities that are going on that they do in a different fashion than what would be normal. And so we're going to try and organize that. You looked at the information. Normally what we see is how much was billed, how much was uncollected, and how much was collected, and then how that impacted the revenue. And those are items that would go in there. There's no way of telling that. So when you look at their cash balance and their money coming in and their money going out of that checking account, it doesn't balance with their operations reports on an annual basis, much less the years they buy an ambulance. Now, they didn't put ambulance purchases in their reports anywhere. Now, they did do one, and they admitted that they purchased one, but it wasn't in there. So for us to be able to make reasonable determinations on what we need, we're going to try and organize their reports so that we can understand them. And so we're probably going to have to take care of that. Some of the other things that we're going to look at is data. We want some more information on first, second, and third ambulances that they get out, and then mutual aid ambulances. And we want to, we're looking at dispatch to try and make some determinations on that, and with the new digital package coming out in January, I think that'll make a difference. So while our auditor told us he could have the audit done by the end of February, I guess we'll wait and see. The contract termination is for the end of February 28th. What we'll do is we'll pay on a monthly basis, extend the contract on a monthly basis until we get everything we need in the contract. And then we'll either make a decision to renew the contract or move on. The operations plan we're supposed to have at the January meeting. That document is available for them. I'll make sure that they get that. And the final one is dispatch has agreed that starting on January 1st, they will comply with the requirements set up in this contract for second response ambulances. Right now, they still really don't do it. And that's neither EMS's problem or ours, it's dispatch. Now, EMS could request immediately upon a second one that we be dispatched, but until that occurs, we can't go. So, but on the new policies going into place in January that will be a requirement to dispatch, so. Any questions?
Before questions, can I just add something? The contract that is attached to the agenda right now is incredibly preliminary. There are definitely aspects that still need to be negotiated and things that need to be addressed that aren't included in the document at this point. And I just want to caution, don't really rely on that document. It's really something that was presented to them. It's in the same form as their previous agreement. There are finer points and there are mechanisms that will be added to that and that will be altered as this proceeds. So I just want to caution there.
Is there any questions from council? Mrs. Bishop?
I do have some points for concern to address. One was when we were first looking at this contract early in the year, we identified issues with who can terminate the contract and on what basis and the time frame. And I don't necessarily see that fixed in this contract, Mr. Drescher, knowing that it's totally a draft. I still see the 120-day termination seems like for any reason that either party could cancel with 120 days notice. And then the other issue we had was that Lake Mills EMS would be given 90 days to cure, but then what's the time frame for notice to cancel if they do not cure? I didn't see that in here, so I may have missed it, but I think that that should be addressed, just because it's an issue that we had in our discussions beforehand. The next thing was the per capita count, Mr. Wilkie. How do we come to a determination? I don't know if there's an official count that the city gives every year, but I think that should be written into the contract so that Lake Mills EMS can't arbitrarily come up with a number, and I'm not saying that they have, but that there's an agreement already in the contract that this is how we're going to calculate this year to year. So those are the two main things. Also, just kind of skimming this, my third point, and I'll be done, I think, is in 11.1 for fiscal management. We talk about, specifically this line, the contract may be terminated by the city at the end of each year if the requested subsidy request is greater than 60% of the city's net new construction. And maybe that was how we were trying to get to, instead of using per capita, we were trying to say we're going to use net new construction as the basis for calculating the fee. But maybe an example here of how that fee is actually calculated in this section would be helpful, just for people reading and interpreting the contract down the road. Those are the three things that I sort of saw just looking at the contract generally.
We've always, both EMS and the city of Lake Mills have agreed, and it probably should be in there, that DOA's number is the one that we use.
Okay.
So Department of Administration number has historically been the number that we use. I don't think there's any disagreement on that. The only time period where it might be a problem is at after census. That census year is always a little screwy. That's one of the reasons for the audit, is to organize their financials into a package where we can then do the per capita. And we've had a lot of conversations about that with them already. That's one of the key items that we're going to be looking for. The other one is Dan has mentioned on multiple times that he wants to touch that termination wording and times for when the financials have to be presented. So, because they need to be more in line with when, because actually the 120 days is before we get the actual per capita. And so there are some things there that make it difficult in the timing. So those are things that we've talked about. They haven't been in there. We were looking more at getting some accurate data. So we talked about wards. I don't know if wards will do it for us, so maybe we have to figure out another way to do it. But we've been in negotiations with them. We're still trying to figure out what'll work. Wards is a state package that they have to submit all their data to.
Yes, Mrs. Quidnow. Ms. Quidnow.
Can you point me in the direction of, in reference to what Ms. Bishop was talking about regarding the terms in which the contract could potentially be nullified? Under which article that's located?
It's earlier on.
Yeah, I thought I saw it, but I just want to make sure I see the agreement. Is it 3.5?
It's 2.1 and 2.2. 2.1 says the agreement shall automatically renew, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Terminated by either party with written notice no less than 120 days.
So I'm just curious, knowing that this is a draft, I feel like for cause if the other party shall breach any of the provisions, and perhaps it may be a little bit naive of me to wonder if there needs to be something more concrete with regard to the financials that you were referring to. Just making sure that maybe there's a check-in on a quarterly basis so that there's not going to be wait until the end of the contract in order to make some determination that there's that things are working or not, but perhaps something a little bit more contractual that includes a check-in with them every quarter. Just knowing that they had struggled with this, so this is going to become somewhat new in some ways. The kinds of financials that you're going to be looking for is not obviously what they're used to reporting. So I'm just looking at this thinking, is there any kind of way that we can make sure that we give them like some kind of guidance if that's what we would choose to do, or are we depending on them to just know?
Well, the financials are broken into two different categories. One's the audit, which they're supposed to be providing in August. And then the other one is the per capita information. Per capita information in the current contract does not provide enough information for us to accurately determine what they're using to make that determination. He did provide a spreadsheet that gave us somewhat of an idea, but because it didn't match their operations reports, the ambulance wasn't on the books, and there's some, I would say that there's a substantial amount of expenses per year that aren't on the books for some reason. We're trying to determine why and how to get those reported and then what they mean to us. So one of the ones I brought up right away is would be important for us to know is how much was billed, how much wasn't collected.
Is that in reference to 11.3 where you're talking about the cost per transport and the cost per capita part, that equation there?
Yes,
Okay.
that equation there needs to be tightened up. And so we want to find out what kind of financials are in there and how they impact us. And that's why the audits are being done. We're going to have to pay for them, but we're looking at 3 years audits. Hopefully that gets organized in a fashion that they can then carry on. So we don't have to do it, but they still need someone annually to, certify that this is an accurate audit.
And I totally respect that, and I'm thinking more about just when, and this is going to be somewhat arbitrary in the example, but in an employment situation, if there was a situation where someone is at risk of losing their job, as the EMS contract was at risk of being cut off, a plan of action is put into place that includes something like this contract, which is like here are the things that we expect you to do, right? And within that comes the check-ins with the employee to make sure that those things are being met in a timely and orderly way, and then eventually that hand-holding gets taken away. But this obviously is not that kind of situation. I'm just paralleling because that's what I know. But I just didn't know if that would be something that for the first year, this is what we have to do. We already get emails about their times. And so within that time reporting, maybe just to you, they are also giving you the information that you're seeking. And if you don't get the information that you're seeking, then that is the opportunity for you to say, I don't have X, Y, and Z. Do you know what I mean? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they could do it if they want to. What I'm going to look for is an auditor that says that the information that's being sent to me is accurate.
So,
Go
may I
ahead.
say something to that point? In regard to the audit, I hate the idea of the city paying for something that is part of the other party's performance that they have to do under the contract. So, section 3.7 at the very least should really just say, EMS shall provide the city a financial report by a certified auditor or an auditor that is accepted by the city, as opposed to us going out and finding the auditor and getting a quote and paying for it out of city funds and city taxpayer dollars. That's just my concern about that.
I respect that, and we had that conversation. Their statement is they're just going to add it to the bill. And I get that. So what I want to do in this situation in the beginning, I don't hope that this carries on forever. But what I want to do is be the one who's able to say, yes or no, this makes sense to me, and this is what I want to see. So if my auditor's doing it rather than their auditor, he knows what I'm looking for and and I have a sense of confidence in him. Once we get to that point, they should be able to have somebody, even a local certified public accountant, be able to fill in the blanks and go on from there. It'll cost them some money, and as a whole, we're still going to pay for it. But I believe that in the beginning, I really want to have a significant feeling of confidence that I'm developing something that can be used long-term.
I understand your point that we're going to pay for it regardless, in a sense, right? But if they're supposed to perform a portion of the contract, they need to build that into their costs, and then we evaluate, do we pay their overall contract fee? And that's just how I would have gone about that. I understand you're doing it your own way, so I will let that happen.
Particularly seeing as we're going back 3 years rather than forward. I hope that in the future they build it in and they have a good idea, but.
Well, and you know, Steve, if they don't build it in and they have to eat that cost, that's their fault as the other party negotiating the contract. They just negotiated it poorly, but we shouldn't negotiate poorly just because the other side is. That's where I'm getting frustrated.
And then there's me on the other side going, okay, I'm not even looking at the financials. I'm looking at you're setting up expectations and saying I'm looking for these particular things, but I don't see them specifically laid out. And so as if I was entering into this situation, I would give me extremely explicit instructions, more so than even this, to really spell out, what are you looking for? What exactly do you want? Because if you can give me exactly what you want, then I know exactly what I need to provide. If I don't have that, if there's some gray involved, it leaves a sense of insecurity. So I want to make sure that, yes, agreeing in some part to what Catherine is saying about the financials, but then also let's make sure that we're real clear on what the expectations are.
Generally, and I'm a government person, so you realize every year that I've been, for 35 years, I've been audited. My work has been audited. So there's a certain level of expectation for what gets sent to you. There's a certain order, everything's accounted for, there are notes for certain things, so you don't look at a checking account and go, why is there $260,000 missing? Well, we bought an ambulance, but we didn't put it in any of our books.
Right, I mean, that makes sense. That's
So-
like, wait, what?
So here I want that auditor to give me a sense of confidence that, everything that should be reported is reported.
Mm-hmm.
When they do that, once we get that organized and we set it up in a fashion, I believe that we feel confident in under our contract, we'll put that type of audit contract in there. Then their people can probably carry it.
Okay.
But at this point in time, we are a unique entity in that we're contracting with a nonprofit locally, and we're doing it on a per capita basis, and the types of financials that we're getting don't match up with what we would normally expect to see. So they're right, under their size, they're not required to do an audit. And they never have. My expectation is that we're getting to the point now where they're going to be spending enough money that they need to be audited for our sake. And we need to understand what that audit is. And so having our auditors set it up, explain to us exactly what the information is that we're getting and how to interpret it, then gives us a high level of confidence in what we're reading. So if we get that one audit per year, we know their auditor's gone through and done certain types of checks, provided us with certain types of information that are key to what we're looking for, I think we're going to be in good shape. Now, you can run down once in a while, and we have the right to run down and ask them to review their books at any time under the existing contract.
Yeah.
But under you run down and, like I said, we've got this information, and it's like, okay, I can't make heads or tails of it. Have an auditor pull it together, organize it, explain to me how this nonprofit organization has to report, and we'll go from there. That gives me a much higher level of confidence in what I'm getting rather than what I'm looking at now.
What's the cost of using the auditor that we have?
About $18,000 for 3 years.
So $6,000 a year is being spent for our audit purposes as a whole entity. Are they going to charge us more for the use of using that for EMS?
No. That's our cost for doing the EMS.
Oh, $18,000 for 3 years. Huh.
And we talked about doing 1 year, but 1 year is much more expensive. And that's because the first year is like $10,000 because they have to go through and organize everything and develop all that information. Then the rest of the years are cheaper. So if we did just 1 year, it would be about $10,000.
Mrs. Bishop?
Lisa, Ms. Curler had something.
Mrs. Curler?
I guess I'm just listening to the conversation here and wanted to add a couple of thoughts to the mix. I don't like the idea of spending $18,000. I think it's important that we all know, that we're being transparent about that. But I think in order for us to negotiate in good faith and for us to get what we need for our citizens, I think we need that information. And in a perfect situation, our contractor would have been providing that every year, all these years that we've had a contract with them, and they haven't. And so it's not a perfect situation. And we've got to provide emergency services to our citizens, and we're under a pretty tight timeline right now. So as much as I'm not, excited about spending that additional money, I think it's necessary for us to see what we're really dealing with and to feel that then we can get the right dollar amount that we feel that we should be paying. I'm wondering too, I'm speculating, I guess, that moving forward, the city of Lake Mills is not the only client of Lake Mills EMS. So in the future, if they improve their auditing, skills, or work with a reputable auditor and get that as a part of their normal procedure every year, that cost will be borne across all their clients, and it wouldn't, solely fall to the city of Lake Mills. I have the sense that our neighboring communities are waiting to see, how this is all going to go with so we're sort of taking the lead to try to get this resolved, and that's going to benefit our neighbors as well.
I've taken several calls from other communities. We are actually meeting with the town of Lake Mills in January. Maybe they'll participate. Greg and I and Dan are meeting with Tom. That being the main item of conversation, so I guess we'll see. But yeah, My problem is if I was going forward, I would have definitely said this is your cost, but going back 3 years to try and develop that historical data to be able to push forward into the future is going to be important. And I don't know how they recoup that cost without billing us.
Ms. Quidnow.
Steve, can you remind me, because I'm not sure, what was the cost that was going to be associated with the contract prior to our decision to renegotiate it? So in other words, what was the cost that they were looking to have their increase be for this coming year?
It was it ended up being 116%,
Right, and what did that come to per year?
93,000 something.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
2022.
That's the total, not the increase, the
Right.
difference.
So what I'm thinking about is that, you know, in context to what you were talking about, Lisa, with regard to like, it's not great to spend $18,000, but it's significantly less than what we would have had to, should we had gone with the contract or with the need that they were presented before. So, you know, we have to kind of look at the pros and cons there.
Any other questions? All right, to summarize real quick, I got a couple points here. The one Ms. Curler touched on was that we may be the largest community, but there's other clients, other communities that are clients here. And the audit fee should be distributed among all municipalities, as Ms. Bishop was referring to as well. So hopefully in the future that can be written into the contract or part of the contract, that it doesn't all fall upon the city of Lake Mills to incur those costs, because that's just not fair to our citizens, that they have to carry that burden for all the other municipalities in the area that's being serviced. The other one I wanted to touch on is the term ends the end of February, and obviously we're not going to be done with this review by the end of February. So what happens in March and April as we continue on trying to decide how we're going to move forward with the EMS contract?
I thought I mentioned that at the beginning, but we're going to go month by month until we have the next signed contract.
Okay. You did state that. I just wanted to clarify that. All right. Is there one other?
Just to clarify that last point, so that would be a continuation of the old contract, but with the new price?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, essentially, we've agreed to pay the 93,000 for the next year. And if we extended the contract in any form, it would be at that price. So what I've instructed Betsy to do is pay month to month until we have a signed contract. Then we normally pay by quarter,
Right.
but until that time, we're going to go month to month.
But we're not agreeing to that contract price at this point, just in the short term, but not in the long term.
Certainly not. I think what's missed here is that we don't have enough information to be able to actually address this. Okay, that's why the contract's in the form that it is. We need more information. They're not able or not willing to provide that information at this point, so we're using a trusted professional to secure that information and make a decision about what we can do and what we should do moving forward. So I want to just caution you and temper this conversation and realize just how preliminary it is, despite making repeated efforts over the last 4 months to get this moving. So,
Thank you, Dan, for the clarification.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, let's move on to the next issue. Item C, discussion on Mill Pond dredging. Discussion points. Mr. Wilkie, the floor is open. You just got off one hot seat, and back to another. Here, no. So you provided a a slew of notes and history on this issue.
Yes, there's the mill pond is, as Andy has pointed out, has changed substantially in the last 40 years. If I remember correctly, some of our employees used to water ski in the mill pond. So you could, areas that have already filled in and are no longer navigable were once navigable. We took our boathouses out 22, 23 years ago. The DNR did, when they ran the water line for the fish hatchery out into the lake, they did dredge the mill pond. They actually had a gravel road running through the bottom of the mill pond. So there's a lot of history. You used to be able to ice skate on there. We used to be able to drive a road grader, what most of us called an anchor, on the mill pond, because the ice back then was thick enough that you could do that. I would never do that nowadays. So it's changed a lot. Under the old dam, we used to get a lot of smells. We used to get a lot of complaints. The new dam has kind of eliminated that problem. We did the initial study coming out of that based on sedimentation and the smells and problems that were developing in the mill pond. So we brought that report forward. Thought it was consistent with a lot of other reports that were being developed in the region. We got the letter back from the DNR stating that there were a lot of issues that they still saw out there and they wanted us to do more research on. At that point in time, we said, okay, we'd look at it. The Joint Rock Lake Committee discussed doing a certain amount of the study, and we discussed doing some other parts of the study. But we haven't completed any of that to date. The topic kind of dropped. My biggest argument was I wouldn't have spent $700,000 on a new dam if I knew they weren't going to dredge the mill pond. But there's some information there that we didn't have at the time about certain types of issues that the DNR was looking at. So it hasn't been a big push. There have been other items that we've been dealing with, and the council did look at it, review it, and did make a decision not to move forward with any of the activity in the mill pond. And while they did look at doing the studies, we haven't pushed the contracts for that yet, and nobody's asked. So it's pretty much where it lays.
I know one of the issues that we had talked about at the time was some of the invasive, or not invasive species, but protective species and that potentially in the mill pond that kind of held things up. That was going to be a long-term study to get past that.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, that part was going to be done by the by the Rock Lake Improvement Association. We were going to do water clarity issues, and they were going to do protected species and aquatic plants. And I haven't heard where they're at either.
You're open for questions at this point?
Yeah, I'm open.
Any questions? Ms. Curler?
Oh, let me back up a minute.
Go ahead. I thought you were ready.
The channel, let's hit the channel a little bit.
All right.
We have already done the pre-application to dredge a channel. DNR doesn't have any representative.
Can you define the channel?
From the lake to the mill pond, which includes basically from the bridge out to the lake.
Wasn't that a strip included up to the boat landing?
No, that's a different one. That was part of the big dredging package. What we proposed, there is some sand siltation or other types of siltation that have filled in the channel, and some rocks things along that line that have been added to it. So we've done a pre-application to the DNR to be able to dredge that. We generally just reach in with a backhoe and dig that out. They don't have anybody, normally they have a representative in this region that reviews those permits, but they don't have anybody here now, so we've had to send our pre-application into the pool that they have at the state and wait and see what happens. But you saw the application and the documents we sent in, or the pre-app.
I think there was a blank pre-app
Was a blank.
application.
Oh, a blank one?
Yeah.
The pre-application that Eric and I sent in on December 10th was for that, the channel portion. That was sent in on December 10th, as Steve said. There's not a water management specialist for Jefferson County at the current time. So they have acknowledged that they've received it and that it is in review. The last time that portion of the project was done was in 1998. There is some data related to the sediment that was done at that time. Eric and I included that in the pre-application, so hopefully that sedimentation evaluation that was done 20 plus years ago will be sufficient to move us forward on that portion of the project.
Are you ready for questions now?
Oh, then Lisa, you go first.
Ms. Curley?
Okay, a few questions, just on that last point, that if that is approved to do that channel from the bridge out to the lake, can that be done within the facility and grounds existing budget? You don't need any special funds for that, that can be done kind of in-house?
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Steve.
street staff will do it. We have the equipment and the staff, so we'll just find a time to go out there and dig it out. It's not as substantial as dredging the mill pond.
Yeah. So just a little bit of a background question, I guess. What is the ownership of the bed of the mill pond itself? And then on the north side, the property owners like Mr. Palmer, if you know, where does it go to the ordinary high water mark? Does it go to a platted line?
I think public trust applies, the public trust doctrine, and I believe the bed of the mill pond itself is community property, is public property. His ownership or any fronting ownership would be determined by the high water mark, their parcel line to the high water mark. And the ordinary high water mark, as I'm sure you know, there is obviously a statutory case law definition that's provided for that, and it is a meandering mark. It's based on marking, really, discoloration or effects from repeated wave action or some form of water action that leaves a distinct mark. So it does actually ebb and flow over time. With regard to private property ownership, it's oftentimes a non-issue. When there's a road in between the waterway and the private property, and the ordinary high water mark is arguably within that public right-of-way as well, it becomes more of an issue. And we do have properties like that in Lake Mills that the property owners do actually own on both sides of a public right-of-way in that circumstance. But on the mill pond, I think the question that you're really getting at is what happens if the waterway is no longer navigable? Where does that line actually stop? And I think that's an appropriate question with regard to the current condition of the mill pond, and I think that's why it's exceptionally appropriate to be planning and figure out what the appropriate solution is with the intent of the council. What do you want to happen with regard to that body of water?
So would it be fair to say that the city is not raising any questions about whether the private property owners along the north side of the mill pond have legal access? There's no really dispute about that.
At this point whatsoever. Right now, they're all obviously viewed as navigable body fronting property, and they own to the ordinary high water mark of that. The bed of the lake is public. It's public trust.
Okay, that sounds good. I guess, Steve, you mentioned, I just was thinking back to one of the memo that you wrote from a few years ago. One of the questions was, well, what is the problem? And you mentioned the smell, that there had been complaints, and that with the new dam, that seems to have gone away. Is there anything about the new dam in the manner that it was constructed or how it's operated that is changing the characteristic, or that has changed the characteristics of the mill pond, or like how quickly it's filling in, if we know? Is it a different design?
Well, it's a different design. We allow a certain amount of water to escape under the existing one. The old one had logs, so it kind of escaped through the logs. But the bottom was kind of sealed in. There were a lot of stormwater drains that came into that area. There was also a large screen before the dam, so a lot of vegetative debris caught on that and then rotted. And then the stormwater pipes actually ran that back up, and a lot of the buildings on Main Street had their roof downspouts tied into those stormwater drains. And so when we rebuilt the dam, we relocated all those to different locations. So it wasn't in a confined area where it started to push the smell up. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things about the dam design that have changed the smell and the collection of materials. As far as the sedimentation, it's probably pretty much the same. We don't allow a lot of water to escape under the dam, just the amount that's required by the wastewater treatment plant agreement. So.
Ms. Quindell?
I noticed that there was a pond aeration option, but that it's not recommended at the present time, and I'm wondering if you could give me some more information about why.
Boy, I'm not exactly sure if I remember, but I think the pond aeration required a certain amount of dredging anyways. Because it was mainly to control the amount of oxygen in the existing water and the plant life. So it didn't really dredge it. And there was enough material in the bottom already that they were thinking that it needed to have some level of dredging.
Okay, so the aeration would be perhaps something of considered maybe a more long-term solution as opposed to dredging every once in a while?
Yes, probably. And aeration wouldn't eliminate the problem. It would just delay it longer. So if you dredged it and then you put in aeration, the aeration would help hold off on the need to dredge again for longer. So I think we looked at it and we determined it was like 20 years ago and now probably 22 years ago that it was last dredged. And the change in the bed from then to now. So, if you looked at it and put in some level of aeration, it might hold it off for 30 or 40 years, maybe 50. So
That seems like a considerable change, considering how expensive dredging will be, rather than spending it every 20-some years, we're instead spending it every 50-some years. And the cost of having aeration in there is probably significantly less than the cost of constantly dredging up the mill pond.
aeration has its own cost, though.
Probably not as much as dredging. I don't know, I'm kind of assuming.
I think there were other methods that might have been, there was a chemical one. They might have looked at that more rather than the aeration method.
Any other questions?
Ms. Bishop, did you have something?
I have comments, not questions.
You can do that too, thank you.
Okay, well, I was waiting for everybody else. It sounds like the city is moving ahead with dredging the channel, which I think is good, and we should absolutely do that. My comments, and why I really wanted to talk about the mill pond, is I think we have a lot of information. We have a strand study, we have, the city manager's information, we have Patricia Cicero's information, but what I'd like to do is recommend that this council put together an ad hoc committee to look at specifically the mill pond, look at its history, and ultimately put together a report of short-term and long-term options for the mill pond, what maintenance looks like, estimated costs, I would like them to consider all the information that the city has in its, repositories. And the report could have a lot of uses. It would inform our way moving forward in the next couple of years. It could be incorporated in the city's comprehensive plan with those long-term options. And I think we need a point of view that takes into account our citizens' needs and wants for the mill pond. When Mr. Palmer spoke, for instance, I didn't know that the mill pond had previously been used for an ice skating rink. And so is that something that the city wants again? I don't know. It's something that should be considered. It's something that the landowners' rights next to the mill pond should be considered, and that's something that I would like the committee to take under advisement. I don't think we can appoint a committee at this meeting. I think it would have to be in one of our next meetings and actually put that on the agenda. But I definitely think, one or two council members should be on the committee, some community members along the mill pond, as well as somebody like Patricia or Ms. Curler, if you want to use your DNR knowledge, I think that would be, I'm not, not saying that you would be interested in this, but pull in somebody like that with that knowledge and get just a more comprehensive idea of what the mill pond needs, that then the city council can actually act on. Some of this information, while probably still relevant, is also 4 years old. The mill pond has undergone significant changes, it sounds like, since then, and so I do think we just need updated recommendations, and so that's my ultimate recommendation based on this conversation.
On one other question, and I'll talk about that real quick. As far as moving forward, I think I'd heard in the past about a 5-year study that needs to be initiated. Is that the most logical place to move forward here? So, okay.
If you don't have that data, you're not going to be able to do anything. You're going to, and I assume that if you do have the data, it's got to be beneficial, not in the other direction, so.
Right. And we'll need to tie that together with what the Rock Lake Improvement Association's working on as well. Okay. So my thought is that we need to do our goal-setting meeting in January and get our arms around everything in the community and what's important and where the council wants to move. I think at that point it would be appropriate to decide how to use our resources and set up these type of committees. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll review that in January as part of our goal-setting initiatives. Any other thoughts, discussion? Yes, Ms. Curley?
Just, I guess, reacting to this discussion, my initial thought is that I do think we need data. If for no other reason, then we're going to need that if we're going to apply for a larger scale dredging project in the future. And I like Catherine's idea in terms of gathering public input and what do people really want, and what would be the best goals that may or may not match with what kind of a permit we can receive, but at least we're giving people some opportunity to provide some input and see where we can head with it.
Any other comments, questions? All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Palmer, for your comments earlier. All right, let's move on with business here. Item D, discussion decision on appointment of election inspectors for the 2022 and 2023 election cycle. And I do have the motion correct this time. It's motion 21-12-2-2. Misty, can you read the motion?
City Council Motion 21-12-2-2, appointment of election inspectors. Did you want me to also read off the names?
I think we're okay with what's in the documentation.
Okay.
So we've all reviewed that and gone over that. So is there a motion?
I move to approve motion 21-12-2-2, appointment of election inspectors.
Second.
Go ahead.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Fields, second by Mrs. Bishop. All right, Misty, did you have any further background on the documentation that was provided?
Not really. These appointments have to be made every 2 years. Everybody that is on the undesignated list has worked for me at elections in the past. as well as the two listed under the Republican Party. The only new one was underneath the Democratic. Everybody is excellent election inspectors, and I'm excited to have them all back.
All right, is there any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, let's move to a roll call vote.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye,
Motion passed 5-0.
thank you. Item F, Resolution 2174. Resolution establishing a special revenue fund, affordable housing fund. Misty, can you read Resolution 2174?
Resolution 21-74, resolution establishing a special revenue fund known as Affordable Housing Fund.
All right, is there a motion for the last resolution of the year?
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 21-74, establishing a special revenue fund known as Affordable Housing Fund.
A second.
All right, motion by Ms. Curler, second by Ms. Quidnow. Is there any question, or Betsy, would you like to provide any additional information here?
Sure. I'm requesting that this Affordable Housing Fund is established so that we're able to track the revenues and expenses outside of the general fund. I'd like to avoid doing that so that we don't have any potential issues with levy limits, expenditure restraint. This will just give us a mechanism for that. I included in your packet the resolution that was passed that extended TID number 2, and that extension allowed for that increment to be used for affordable housing. In the TID close, it did segregate those funds for affordable housing, and also the other document is also related to the affordable housing and the extension for TID number 2. So immediately, that's what I'm looking at, is to take the funds that are in TID number 2 set aside for affordable housing and put this into the Affordable Housing Fund instead.
So that was Resolution 20-50, which was last year's City Council resolution. Okay.
Right.
All right, is there any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
All right, so that's the end of council business. Any recommendations for future agendas? I did want to touch on putting together some type of a goal-setting meeting in January. What steps do we need to go through? We wanted to secure a moderator for that, so we probably need to look at their schedule as well.
Yes, and you agreed to get a hold of her, and you and I meet with her to discuss what we would be looking at. I don't know that we would need her for the first meeting, but it never hurts.
Okay.
And from there, we kind of set schedules. The key is to get that first meeting scheduled. So I'm assuming that unless you guys do it tonight, we can have Misty send out a question poll.
So right now in January, we just have the one meeting, which is Tuesday, the 18th, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some agenda items for that. I know the Parks Board has sent up the Commons for resolution.
Yeah, that's, that probably will end up in February, though, because but I could be wrong.
Eric's been telling us that it would be the 18th.
Okay.
He said the boat lifts would be in February.
I think you're right.
Since we're not meeting in early January, might be nice to get at least that first goal setting meeting, or at least some dates out there for us to hold.
How does that January 11th look, which is the second Tuesday of the month?
For us, it's going to be a bummer because we're going to have that big wastewater treatment plant.
Oh, you have
Proposal
a
at the Public Works
Works Board?
Should we do it after that, the 13th or 14th?
14th on a Tuesday?
No, 14th
14th
is a
is a
Friday.
Thursday, Friday that week?
How about Thursday, the 13th? How's that look on people's schedule?
I can make it work.
Can do that.
All right, let's slate that 13th, the Thursday. Not great?
Not great for you.
do the week that we don't have council?
That is that week.
No, the,
Fourth.
January 3rd? Or is that not enough time to?
The 13th's not going to work for me.
I think a lot of the staff is gone
I got
that
corporate
week, isn't
meetings,
that
I'm going to be out
true?
of town.
Okay.
No, we should all be back on that week. The problem is getting prepared for that meeting
Yeah.
because we're going to be gone the week before. So that's generally our turn to,
How's the Thursday, the 20th look?
I can do that.
But that's early.
That one works for me.
If there is a meeting for the Police and Fire Commission, it would be that evening, but that's usually pretty short, and it's at 5 o'clock.
It's at 5?
Yeah.
So if we did a 6 o'clock, we'd be okay?
yeah, Police and Fire Commission lasts 10 minutes.
Do we look good on the 20th?
We could do it at 5:30.
You said you're good?
I got another meeting here, but I can move, I can skip that one for Citizens Academy. At 6 o'clock on Thursday, 20th. Exact
How
same
long's the
time, we'll be
meeting go?
downstairs.
How long does the meeting go?
They got it booked for an hour and a half right now, but
Whoa, okay. We go 7 o'clock?
I'll make it
Would be
work.
pretty good.
Yep, I'll make it work.
So we're doing 7
7
instead of
o'clock on
6?
like the 20th?
I'll go from downstairs to upstairs.
Yep.
Okay. Let's go for that as our first, and then we'll schedule another meeting at that meeting. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, anything else for future agendas?
So that was January 20th?
Correct, Thursday, the 20th.
Thursday, the 20th at 7 PM. All right. Merry Christmas. This meeting's adjourned. Thank
Happy
you.
holidays.